Good day, grade 8. I'm Miss Babo, and today's lesson will be about static electricity. We are going to be looking at what static electricity is, what the different forms are of electricity, and how static electricity is created. Electricity can be found in two forms. The first form is current electricity, which shows the flow of charges, and static electricity, which is the stationary build-up of a charge on an object. In static electricity, the current does not flow, where in current electricity, the current does flow. Static electricity can be caused by friction. Friction is the rubbing of materials onto one another, which allows the transfer of the outermost electrons from one object to another. As you can see in the image displayed, a PVC pipe will be rubbed on a rag and the electrons will be passed from one substance or one material to another. With static electricity, the electrons are transferred from one object to another. So the object that will gain electrons will become negatively charged, and the object that loses electrons will become positively charged. This is because the charge of an electron is negative. So if it gains electrons, it means it will become more negative as the charge is a negative charge. And when it loses electrons, it becomes more positively charged because it's losing the negative particles. So we can explain static electricity as the following. It is the build-up of electric charges on the surface of a material, and it is usually on a non-conductor of electricity. If it were to be on a conductor of electricity, the current would flow or the charge would flow, and that's not static electricity. We call it static as there is no movement or flow of a charge. It stays on the object once it's built up. There are several ways in which we can create or cause static electricity. In an atom, the outer electrons, which are called the valence electrons, can be moved by. The first way is friction. Friction here is the rubbing of one object on another, and the electrons are removed from one and transferred to the other through the rubbing motion. The second way that we can cause or create static electricity is through contact. This is when a charged object will touch a neutral object and transfer some of the charges to that object. In this scenario, the charges will be shared between the two objects that are touching. The last way in which we can cause or create static electricity is through a process called polarization. With this process, it is a temporary charge that is created on a neutral object only due to a charged object that is brought closer to that neutral object. In this process, there is no contact that is involved. The one side of the neutral object will be attracted to the charged object that is brought closer. When we refer to charges in this section, like charges, which means a positive and a positive, or a negative charge and a negative charge, will always repel one another, and opposite charges like a positive charge and a negative charge will attract each other. As you can see in the diagrams here, positive and negative will pull towards each other, which means there is an attractive force between them, and negative will repel from one another, which means they'll push away as there is no attraction force between them. A Van der Graaff generator is a piece of apparatus that builds up an electric charge on a dome due to static electricity. It is a generator that uses a moving belt which will accumulate the charge on top of the metal globe that is placed at the top of the Van der Graaff generator. With regards to safety of static electricity, friction can cause a positive charge on one substance and a negative charge on the other. A discharge of those two charges on a substance will result in a spark that could perhaps ignite materials. Now, the sparks are caused by the heat that are released, or the heat that is released from the fast-moving particles that will move from one object to another due to the buildup of a charge. When someone gets shocked, it is a reflex response of the electricity passing through if you were to have touched that object that obtains the charge or that has the charge. And the cracking sound that one would usually hear due to static electricity is caused by the rapid heating of the air when the charge is released. An example of static electricity that we can see in nature is lightning. During a thunderstorm, there is friction in the atmosphere between the particles or the water particles that make up the clouds. This causes a build-up of regions within the cloud of a specific charge. Once there is a difference in charge between the two regions that is great enough, there will be a discharge from the clouds, which is what lightning is. The lightning flash is what we call a massive discharge between those two regions where there is different build-up based on friction of the particles within the clouds. Thank you for coming to my lesson. We will see you next time for energy transfer in electrical systems.